Most people are fearful because they see a world which functions in a certain way which doesn't resonate with their deepest desires, and therefore they're fearful or they're frustrated. But when we understand why this world is here and why it functions, so many fears dissipate. So living a life of fearlessness is very much possible. But if we try to become fearless by physical, mental or intellectual arrangements, it will only work for some time. But when you become fearless by understanding the bigger perspective of life through spiritual wisdom, then you really and truly become fearless. We are going to be discussing fear, anxiety. Put your hand up if you have a little bit of fear and anxiety in your mind and heart right now. Okay, excellent. Anyone who want to tell us what it is? Hopefully it's not like, when is this guy going to stop? I've just started. What are some of your fears? Can you say? Or not your fears, but fears people have in life. What kind of fears do you think people have in life? Failure, fear of failure. Yeah.
Fear of finding your purpose.
Fear of finding your purpose. I thought you said fear that Man United are going to lose. Yeah, will I be able to find my purpose? What's my future? Sometimes we're really fearful about the future because like there's sometimes so many expectations that people have about us, so sometimes we're fearful about that. What other things are you fearful of? I'm just trying to understand you guys. Come on, you're not going to be a tough audience for me today, are you? Tell us what you're fearful of. What's on your minds? Or not you personally, but you think people are fearful of. Fear of death. Death of ourselves or death of loved ones. Yeah. Losing people, yeah. Fear that people who are really close to us may leave the world. Yeah.
Not being able to let go of past experiences and learn from them.
So fear of the past experiences and not being able to let go of it. So it constantly, sometimes we do something in our life and then we're constantly haunted by it. It just keeps coming back up and it creates a fear and anxiety in us. Yes?
Fear of not living up to your own expectations and goals.
Yeah, that, I have dreams and I have a dream, as Martin Luther King said. And sometimes whether we have fear, will I be able to achieve those dreams? Thank you. Will I be able to achieve those dreams? Thank you so much. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's important for us to understand that the fears we have are not just our fears. Those are the same fears that everyone is going through. Sometimes you have a fear and you think, everyone's happy, but why do I have this fear within me? But oftentimes these are very, very universal. Yes, did you have something you wanted to share? Fear about finances. We're fearful that we'll have too much money in our life. What will I do with all that money? Oh God, it's such a fear. Yes, we're fearful. Will I earn enough? Will I have enough? Like that. So lots of fears are there. I kind of just went straight in, just to give you a little bit of background of who I am, apart from a tall guy wearing orange, which clearly you have seen in front of you. I grew up in London. That deserves a cheer, if you want. So I grew up in London, and I guess I grew up as a pretty average kid, just doing what kids do. Yes, please come. You can take one of the front seats, they cost less. Welcome. So I grew up in London, and I guess when I was about 15 or 16, I started having questions of life. And for me, the biggest fear I had in my life was fear of the future. Because when I was 15 or 16, I saw people doing things in their life. I guess I grew up in quite a wealthy family. So I saw people who had everything. They had money, they had really good jobs, they had amazing families. But I saw that people had everything, but still didn't seem to be happy. It seemed like something was missing in their life. And so my fear was like, what am I going to do in the future? Because what everyone else is doing doesn't seem to resonate with my heart. And so at the age of about 15 or 16, I began looking into different spiritual traditions. So I read a little bit of Christian texts, I had Muslim friends, so I read a bit of Islamic philosophy, and of course I read an ancient Vedic teaching called the Bhagavad Gita. We have it here, and this is a very, very ancient teaching. And in all of these books I found incredible knowledge and wisdom. And I went to university when I was 18. I studied at University College London. And I studied information management, computer science and management. And university was a really interesting time for me, as I'm sure it is for you, because university is a time when you can explore life. So I was living away from home, and I was exploring life. All the angles, all the sides of life, as I'm sure you are doing too. And broadly speaking, I was at university, I was seeing like people had different approaches to happiness. Some people were just like hard out, party, and just enjoy freedom and do the wildest things you can at university, and that was one path. Put your hand up if you've done that path. Come on, we know you've all been there. And then there was another path of happiness, which was like, do really well in your university, get your head down, be academically, top of the game. So I saw some people going in that direction. I saw some people going in the direction of sports or other hobbies, or trying to make friends and have relationships, and they were going in that path. And so I was exploring all of these. And I also thought to explore more spirituality. So near the university, we had a temple, and so I used to go to the temple. And I used to meet the monks, and I used to ask them questions about life. And anyway, one thing led to another. I got more interested, and when I was 21, I graduated, and then I went to India. And at the age of 21, I traveled in India for 6 months, and then I decided that I'd become a monk. So I did do that. I thought I'd do it for 1 year and then see what happens. And then over time it extended, and I've been a monk for, I guess, coming up to 25 years now. I know I look young. So, and that's kind of just a little bit of my humble life story, just so you know who the guy in front of you speaking is. So today we're going to talk a bit about fear and how to overcome fear, anxiety. I'm just going to flash some things up on the screen, and what I want you to do is don't hold back, just be like completely free. What I want you to do is just shout out the first word that you see. Is that okay? Yeah? Alright, so here we go. As soon as you see the next slide, just tell me the first word that you see.
Cake.
Okay, cake. Oh my God, that was so quick. Any others? Cane. Case. Care. Cape. Cake. Cafe. Okay, very good, yeah. There are many different words. According to psychologists, whatever word you see, it kind of reflects something about your state of consciousness at the moment. You know? So, I'll leave it to you, Karuna, to think about, what. And certain words, if you see them, they can indicate a certain mindset that may, and sometimes we're not even conscious sometimes that we're in a certain state or mindset. Okay, I'll give you another one, yeah? Tell me what you see. He's not going to say anything. All right, ready? Go. Stove. Stove. Store. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Just think about the word. Every time I flash up a word, you have to do it instinctively for it to work. Just really think about that word, because when I've done this with groups, it's quite accurate. Okay, I'll give you another one. Snare. Scare. Spare. Scare. If that's the first thing you see, it may. These things indicate something. Okay, I'll give you another one. All of you wanted to say meal, just admit it. Yeah. Okay, one last one, yeah? One last one. Okay, this is the one I was going to call the police in on, Oh, one final one. Rage. My one was sage. The first thing we want to share with you is that sometimes we're not even aware of our own mindset. Because nowadays people don't sit with their own thoughts. Sometimes we have a certain mindset and we're just moving in life. And we're not even aware whether I'm being negative, whether I'm being, critical, whether I'm being very limiting. But often these emotions can come in. The first thing we share with people, what we do as monks, is we do something called mindfulness. Have you heard of mindfulness? Yeah? Mindfulness, you can do it in different ways, but basically it's a practice by which you become more aware of your own thoughts. Some people's thoughts are their biggest enemies. And so before we can solve a problem, we need to know what the problem is. And therefore, sometimes just doing some mindfulness can help us to sit and understand our own inner territory, as it were. Put your hand up if you have a fear now that you didn't have 20 years ago. Well, sorry, 20 years ago is too much. You can see how old I am. God, I'm 43 now. Can you imagine? I'm 43. That is like old. At university, that's old. Okay, put your hand up if you have a fear now that you didn't have 10 years ago. Something you're scared of now that you were not scared of 10 years ago. Everyone. Okay, put your hands down. Put your hand up if there was something 10 years ago that you were fearful about that you're no longer scared of. Anyone want to say what that is?
Me?
Yeah.
I think 10 years ago. Not 10 years ago.
Whenever.
Probably. Oh wait, it was 10 years ago. Probably when I was like around 8 years old. So that's 20 years ago. I had a very existential fear of death.
Okay.
So like of just the process of just ending without ending. So I used to fear something like if we will all,
Die.
die. And everything will disappear. And that means whatever I move forward in, I lose. I lose everything in the end.
So that was a big fear when you were 8. But over time, what you've managed to do is kind of process that and come to terms with that. Yeah, do you know they say the 3 biggest fears in life? Number 1, death. Number 2, exams. And you know what the number 3 is? Public speaking.
What about taxes?
Taxes as well, yeah. So there was a fear 10 years ago that you're not fearful about now. There's a fear you have now that you didn't have 10 years ago. Put your hand up if you have a fear that somebody else is not fearful about. Only some of you? The rest of you are saying every single fear you have, everyone else around you has that same fear. Is that what you're saying? All of us have fears that other people around us don't have, right? And are there fears that other people have that we don't have? The fact that we say yes to every single one of these questions, what does that tell you? What does that tell you?
Fear is unique to each individual.
Okay, fear is unique, but what does it tell you?
Everyone experiences fear to some degree.
Okay, everyone experiences fear to some degree, yes? I'm looking for something else.
Being fearful isn't something we should take as a negative, because by us being fearful, we actually end up maybe learning a value lesson how we can improve our lives.
Okay, so fear isn't bad. Okay, good. I'm looking for something else. Yeah.
We suffer so much in between, but still at the end, things turn out right.
Okay, so it always works out. Okay, I'm looking for something else.
I think the fact that everyone here probably has a fear that we don't have, like that others don't have, is probably an indication that everyone here is actually moving towards and yearns for something or goal in
Okay.
their lives and yearns for purpose in their lives.
Okay, so fear indicates we're on a journey, we're trying to move towards a different space, but I'm looking for something else.
Fear is common.
Yes, I'm looking for something else. This tells you it's a big thing and it's really important. Yes?
I think that fear is about someone's personal experience about life being fear, not about.
So it's not objective. Basically, you got it. Fear is learnt. Fear is not inherent in you. Because if it was inherent in you, how can it change? Therefore, the fact that your fears have changed, the fact that you have fears that others don't, others have fears that you don't, mean that fear is something we learn. And therefore, if fear is something you can learn, then what does that also mean? Fear is something you can also unlearn. Now this, most people don't know. And therefore what they do is they just accept their fears and they move on with that. I'm going to skip this out for now. When people try to overcome their fears, they do it in different ways. Some people try to overcome their fears by making practical arrangements. So sometimes we make practical arrangements like we take out an insurance policy. Or we make a practical arrangement like we make sure we got enough money in the bank. Or we make a practical arrangement like we take a vaccine. Anti-vaxxers? I don't know. So can you see? These are physical ways, practical ways in which we try to overcome fear. Do you think they eradicate our fears? Do they work? To some extent. Sometimes we try to overcome our fears by a mental adjustment. For example, by taking intoxication. Sometimes what we do is we alter the state of our consciousness, or we dull ourselves out so that the fears that are in our mind, we kind of just forget them for some time. Sometimes we just go to sleep. They say if someone constantly sleeps excessively, then it indicates a very fearful or a very some kind of sense of emptiness within them. That sometimes all we're able to do is dull it out. And sometimes we try to overcome fear in an intellectual way. So sometimes we try to give ourselves different arguments, different ways of thinking, affirmations. We try different things to strengthen our intelligence, to convince ourselves that we don't have to be fearful. But what you'll find is that all of these ways of overcoming fear don't actually deal with the root cause of the problem. These may give you some temporary relief, but they'll never solve your fear. And therefore, most people are living in the world out of fear. Today, what we're going to share with you is that there is a deeper way to deal with your fear. But that requires an elevation of consciousness. I'm going to share with you an ancient verse from something called Niti Shastra. Shastra is a Sanskrit word. It means scripture. And it means the insights of great teachers from previous generations that help us to understand our human condition in a more deeper way. So what this ancient verse says in Sanskrit, Bhoge Roga Bhayam. Bhayam is a word which means fear. So what this ancient verse says is, what is fearing disease? The tendency within oneself to want to enjoy their senses. That's what's fearing disease. Right? This is very deep. Think about this. Kule Chuti Bhayam. What fears the loss of family? The attachment that we have within our heart. Some of you mentioned that, we fear this very, very deeply. Greed fears loss of money. Power fears enemy. Beauty fears old age. A liar fears exposure. And everyone fears death. This is an ancient verse from the Niti Shastra. Now, if you think about this, this has a deep implication. Because if you look at the world, when the world is trying to overcome fear, then what is the world dealing with? All of these things, right? We're trying to structure our life in such a way that we'll never get disease. We're trying to structure our lives so that, hoping that nobody will die around us. We're hoping to create security. We ensure that enemies don't come into our life, or we keep them at bay. We do all we can to avoid old age. We try to cover up all our tracks so no one will figure out all the white lies. And we make every arrangement to either counteract death or not think about death. The amazing thing is that, can you stop any of those things? You can't stop any of those things. And that's why people are constantly fearful, because they're trying to eradicate these things, but these things can't be eradicated. But what this verse tells us is instead of eradicating that part of the equation, what you may be more wise and insightful to do is eradicate the other part of the equation. It's not you that fears disease, according to ancient scriptures. It's the mentality that life is about enjoying your senses. It's that mentality that fears disease. It's not you in your deepest sense, that fears old age. But it's the identification you have within yourself that I'm this body and I'm defined by how I look. That is what makes you fearful of old age. It's not a loss of money that you are fearful about, but it's the mentality that I'm defined by my possessions, by my positions, by all the external factors that everyone will appreciate me for. Because we define ourselves by those things and we think that's who we are, therefore, whether it's loss of money or loss of a job or loss of a title, is very fearful to us because we have that mentality within us. So therefore, the ancient teachers tell us, don't try and solve these things to eradicate your fear. Rather, change these things. Some of you may have seen this before. Circle of influence and circle of concern. If you understand this, you can save yourself so much anxiety. In our life, there are things which are in our circle of influence. There are things we can change, things we can deal with. And then it's said that there's a bigger circle, which is the things which concern us, which worry us, which are on our mind, but which we can't do necessarily anything about. Right? So what social scientists tell us is whichever circle you focus on, that circle will expand. And because most people focus on the circle of concern, then what happens is that circle expands, and the gap between these two circles is the amount of frustration in your life. And so a smart person doesn't just keep focusing on the circle of concern, but what they say is, yes, there are many things in the world which trouble me, but let me focus on what I can influence right now. Let me focus on that which is within my grasp, within my locus. And when they do that, then what happens is their circle of influence expands, and this becomes smaller and smaller. So in an ancient text I was mentioning to you today about the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna says, or what Krishna does in this conversation, Krishna is the speaker of this book. What he basically does is he imparts wisdom to Arjuna, who is the listener. And basically what Krishna does is he gives a complete vision of reality. He helps Arjuna to understand what is in your influence and what is outside of your influence. And Krishna gives a blueprint of reality that helps us to understand what we should focus on and how we can develop ourselves. So this is the Bhagavad Gita. It's written in Sanskrit, an ancient, beautiful ancient language. It's about 700 verses long. And what does it talk about? 5 main things. The first thing is the Bhagavad Gita explains that you're not this body, but you're a spiritual being which is driving this body. Right? Now that may seem very, very simple to you, but so many fears dissipate when you understand, I'm not this body, I'm not this dress, but I'm something beyond just this physical machinery. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita goes on to explain what this world is. He said this world is just a transit lounge. We're just here for some time. And this world is not our true home. This world is wired in such a way to give us certain lessons of life. When you understand why this world exists and why it functions in the way it does, then so many of your fears dissipate. Most people are fearful because they see a world which functions in a certain way which doesn't resonate with their deepest desires, and therefore they're fearful or they're frustrated. But when we understand why this world is here and why it functions, so many fears dissipate. And then Krishna explains there's a law in this world, a law called karma. And when we understand this law of karma, what we understand is that everything in life is happening for a reason. And when you understand everything happens for a reason, your fears dissipate. And then, what the Bhagavad Gita explains is that above all of this is a divinity and a divine reality, a spiritual reality, an eternal reality which is beyond this world. And when we understand that there is a benevolent divinity which is overseeing everything here, then your fears disappear. And then Krishna says, there is a time frame through which divinity is controlling this world, so everything goes in cycles. And knowing that everything goes in cycles means things come and then things go. And then things come again and then they go. Everything is just in flux, like a cycle, because time moves in a cycle. And when you understand this, then your fears dissipate. And the ultimate thing that Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita is that as a spiritual being, we can connect with that divinity. That is called yoga. And when you do that, that's when you truly become fearless. Because the only way to become fearless is to understand that everything we're fearful of in this world is superfluous to us. We are actually spiritual beings who have a connection with much more profound reality. And when we're established in that relationship, then things don't affect us anymore. So sometimes when we're looking out at life, our problems look like this. They look very, very big. But when we get spiritual knowledge, spiritual wisdom, then what happens? We step back and we realize this is actually what it is. Right? Basically, right now, we're going on in life, and when we see our life, we're seeing everything like this. We're seeing something that's not there because we have the wrong perspective. But when you get spiritual wisdom, spiritual knowledge, and you step back and you see the bigger picture, then all of those things which were so fearful to you, which seemed to be so insurmountable, which seemed to dominate your mind, because you now step back, you're like, what's that? There's a whole bigger picture around it, which is much more significant. Therefore, spiritual wisdom is the most amazing thing that you can contact in your life, because it will change your entire experience. But you have to be patient, you have to be hungry for knowledge, and if you take the time of making that investment, then what will happen is that your circle of influence will expand, because you understand, who am I, what is my capacity, and you stop focusing on that which is outside of your circle of influence. And then what will happen is you'll see gradually you become free from your fears. So living a life of fearlessness is very much possible. But if we try to become fearless by physical, mental, or intellectual arrangements, it will only work for some time. But when you become fearless by understanding the bigger perspective of life through spiritual wisdom, then you really and truly become fearless. So these are some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I'm not going to go on too long now. Meaning, as I understand, this is like we're taking a break here? Or okay, so we go into the... Okay, so we have a little bit of time. We're going to do a little meditation, and we're going to give you guys little practical kind of some things to take experience. But before we do that, we got an opportunity. If anyone wants to ask any questions or wants to know more about something, or if there was something I said which didn't make complete sense, then I'm happy to kind of respond to any of those. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Is it possible to get water?
Please forgive me. I wanted to ask...
I forgive you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question that I personally struggle with. You mentioned that when we get our mindset, a lot of the times we move with this mindset, not understanding or being aware how badly it can pull us down. And you also mentioned how sometimes we're not aware of how turbulent our own minds are. And that's why some of us struggle with this mindfulness. What advice would you give from a perspective where your mind feels so turbulent at times you don't even know where to begin to help understand it? What is like the thing always?
Thank you so much. Brilliant question. So I talked about how the mind is turbulent, and most of us don't even know the state of our own mind. So how do we get to grips with it? So I'll give you 3 things. Okay? First thing, breathing. Second thing, reading. Third thing, journaling. Okay, I'll explain each one. First thing is, I give you guys can try this out. Okay, what you do is you go on your phone. I've got an iPhone. I'm part of the cult. What you do is you have this, right? You have a timer. So what you guys do it as an experiment for the next 3 days. And if it doesn't work, that's your problem. Set a timer for 3 minutes. And on this iPhone, I'm not a promoter of iPhones, but I'm just saying, what you can do is you can set this timer to go off at 3 times in the day. 3 times, 3 minutes. And what I want you to do for the next 3 days is try to stop for 3 times in the day for 3 minutes. And in that 3 minutes, what I want you to do is just go to a quiet place, close your eyes, and just breathe. So what I mean when I say breathe is I do that all day. What I mean is really breathe. Right? Let me just do an experiment with you guys. Take a deep breath in. And then out. And one more. And out. When you breathe in, does your stomach go in or out? In, out, out, in, in. Oh my God, we don't have a consensus here, it seems. It seems that some people here aren't even breathing properly. That's amazing, isn't it? In or out? In, out. I'm surprised some of you aren't dead. When you breathe, if you really breathe, then your stomach should go out. Because you're supposed to be filling your lungs with air. Most of us don't even breathe properly. So, the first thing I want you to do is try it out. 3 times in the day for 3 minutes. You stop, and all you do is you close your eyes And when you breathe in through your nose. And when you breathe out, you can open your mouth, and or you can just do it through your nose, whatever. And all you have to do is focus on the sensation of the breath on your nostrils. That's all I want you to do. Try it out. Because breathing is connected to your mind. Have you noticed? Every time your emotions change, what changes? When you're excited, your breath changes. When you're fearful, your breath changes. When you're in love, your breath changes, right? So it works the other way around as well. If it works this way, then it also works this way. Which means if you control your breath, you can also calm your mind. Okay? So first thing is breathe. That just helps you to be more present. Second thing is read. We have amazing books. We have amazing wisdom. What happens is when you read wisdom, it helps you to see your inner world. Most books in this world, they tell you about the outer world. That's great. We need to know about that world. But what's the point of knowing about the outer world if we don't know about the inner world? So spiritual books, spiritual wisdom, we've got some books here, you can take them away. Read for 5 or 10 minutes a day and see what kind of insight that gives you to see the inner workings of yourself. And the third thing is journal. Because you know what I mean by journal? Right? You write down your thoughts, your experiences. Basically what you do when you journal is you take your mind and you put it in front of you. And then when you see your mind in front of you, then you see what your mind is all about. And then you can start to correct your mind on the paper. So what I tell people is when you write a journal, it's like editing your own consciousness. Because what you do is you download everything here to here, and then you sort it out here, and once you've sorted it out here, you kind of look up here and it's all changed. It's a very powerful technique. So these are 3 things you can do that will help you to have a better relationship and understanding of your own mind. Is that okay? Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I just want to, before I ask the question, can I please just check my understanding as well? So your point seems to be, first it looks like a sort of story point where you're first trying to look at your sphere of influence and focusing on that rather than for concern
Yes.
outside your sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a meta thing that you're doing where you're sort of flipping things back on their heads, where you're trying to say that you brought up examples where you said like beauty fears old age and
Yeah, so basically in that point I'm explaining, instead of working on the externals, correct your own mentality, your own mindset. Yeah.
okay.
So your question?
So my question is sort of this. For a long time, right, I sort of thought that there was a sort of tension that was going on. So I just so that you know which point I was coming from when I was making this point, I was still an atheist. I was still an atheist about it. So I was thinking about this for a long time, but there was a tension in my head about the definition in evolutionary theory about reproduction. Right? And I've thought about basically how evolution defines it. It seems as if reproduction, the ability of things to reproduce, is the definition of what's real. So I've looked for things that would reproduce for forever and ever and ever in order to be able to define what's actually real.
Okay, so what's your question exactly?
Okay, and so what my thoughts about what you did there, where you moved from our states of our everyday states of mind, where we want money, we want attachment, we want family, to something that's eternal. How do you get people to say move to something that's more eternal?
Okay, got it, yeah.
That's more real.
Sure.
In a practical way.
That's the $64 million question. So thank you. So you're asking basically that I've made this point that we're shifting from the material to a spiritual perspective. And you're saying, how do you get people to make that change? Because most of us are just rooted in a material way of thinking, a material approach to life. Therefore, that's why we have these spiritual gatherings. Because the first thing is when you actually get in a room and you actually begin to discuss these things, then it gives you the opportunity to have another perspective of life. Most of us, we're just surrounded by the same messages every single day. We're surrounded by the same opinions of the world that tell you, if you don't get this, this and this, then you're not successful. We're surrounded by the same narratives and traditions that tell us, this is how your life should go. But you guys are young, you're intelligent, you should have the opportunity to challenge. They say the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, we've always done it this way. But why? Right? If someone tells a lie loud enough and long enough, you know what it becomes? A truth. If enough people accept the so-called truth, you know what it becomes? A culture. And if a culture is passed from one generation to the next, you know what it becomes? A tradition. And then people are born into that tradition and they set their whole life and all of their life goals according to the tradition, which is based on a so-called culture, which is based on a so-called truth, which is actually a lie. And that's what 99.9% of the population do. They just follow along with the world like sheep and don't really question things, don't really question the world. You should have this, you should have that, you should have achieved this. By 29, you should be like this. Why? Who told you that? No, that's what the world tells us. Yeah. But did you make that choice? I challenge you to look at the choices you've made in your life and ask yourself, did you make them? Did you make that choice? Yes, of course I made the choice. I'm free. Really? Maybe you are free, but you're not using your capacity of freedom, all of us, because we're not thinking, we're not challenging the world. Therefore, Einstein, he said, never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. But nowadays, most people don't question. They just go along with everything. So questioning is good, challenging is good, and therefore we create these forums. And when we create these forums, we don't expect you to just believe what we're saying. We don't expect you to just say, yeah, that's the right thing. No, we want you to also question us. Because when we question and we have a dynamic conversation, then we uncover deeper realities. So that's how we get people to make this shift, by questioning. Yes?
This is completely a little bit off the topic, but I just wanted to know, can monks float in the air? And
Can monks float in the air?
can monks also have babies and girlfriends?
Wow. Okay, I think it's time for the next bit. Can monks float? Question number 1. For a small fee, I can do a demonstration. So actually it's said that there are yogi ascetics in India who can levitate. Now that may to some people seem like a fantasy, it may seem like something really spiritually far out, but it's not that difficult actually. Well, it is difficult, but it's not impossible, let's say it like that. The idea is that not just monks, anyone, there are certain laws by which this world functions, but your mind can sometimes be more powerful than the laws of nature. And actually some of you have experienced that, isn't it? Like say for example, sometimes every single day we eat 3 times a day. But have you seen that sometimes when your mind is so absorbed in something, that sometimes you can just go a whole day without eating. Like you almost forget to eat. That shows the power of the mind, that the power of the mind can actually go beyond the physical. So therefore, yogis in India are able to harness their mind in even higher ways, and therefore they can act contrary to certain laws of nature, even gravity. And so it's possible. And if you want to go, you can go. Every 12 years there's something in India called Kumbh Mela. Have you heard of this? This is the biggest gathering of human beings on earth. Right? And all these yogis and different, it's like like you have a music festival or something, everyone comes, it's like that, but it's a spiritual version of it. So all these yogis come. It's said that in 1 month, you know how many people come there? 80 million. What's the population of South Africa? 60 million? Basically this whole country comes to that one place. And to this day, the Indian government doesn't even know how all these yogis get there because there's not enough trains to bring them there. So there are mystical ways they get there. I'll tell you that another time. So I cannot personally float. I'm working on it. Maybe by the next time I come South Africa, I'll do a demo for you. But there are yogis who can do it. Okay, so that's your first. And then the second one was, can monks have babies and girlfriends? Okay. So there are 2 different types of monks. One type of monk is what you call a student monk. So they are, and we have ladies that do this as well, by the way. And they practice monasticism for some time. So for example, you can be a monk for a week. If you want, in our temple in London, we do something called be a monk for a week. You can try it out. You don't have to shave your head, don't worry. So you can be a monk for a week, a month, a year, and then the student monks, what they do is eventually they get married and they have a family, they have children. Right? So some of our devotees here, they were monks and then they got married and had children. So it's entirely possible. And then there are some monks which take the vow that they will remain as monks for the rest of their life. So when they take that vow, then they hold one of these, which is a weapon for self-defense, amongst other things. This is the staff of a renunciate. So when we take a lifelong vow of celibacy, then we make the vow that we'll never enter into family life or any relationships of that sort. Instead, what we do is this staff has 3 bamboo sticks in it. So the 3 bamboo sticks represent the body, the mind, and the words. And so what we do is we make a vow that we won't go into family life, but what we'll do is we'll accept the whole world as our family. And so what we do is we try to travel, and in different places we try to share wisdom with people. Wisdom that will help them to live better lives, and we try to use our mind, our body and our words in serving others. So those lifelong monks, no babies, no girlfriends, no cry. If you're interested, we have vacancies. I just give anyone else a chance. If there's anyone else who wants to ask a question. Is that back there? One more? Okay, I saw two hands. Okay. Is that a question? Okay. Do you have a question? No. No? Okay, no, that's fine. Okay.
I'm not sure if you remember this, but you were also on a podcast called The One Way Show, is that correct? And you said...
Guilty as charged.
You said something that really stuck with me, and I was wondering if you could talk more about it. I think it was something along the lines of, you can try and focus on material nature, or the modes of material nature, the modes that govern it. Would you mind elaborating more on that? Because I found that really fascinating.
So the material world functions in a certain way. See, we walk out of this door, we look at the universe, it functions in a certain way. Like I said, there are traditions, there are cultures, there are certain ways, ways of thinking that shape how the world is. What most people do is they try to synergize themselves with the ways of the world. The traditions, the cultures, the different goals and the values. And so what we try to do is we just try to synergize ourselves with that. That's what we talk when we say going with the flow of life. Just going with the flow of what everyone else is doing. But what the spiritual teachers say is that instead of synergizing yourself with the material flow of the material world, what you can do is you can try to understand the higher dimensional workings of this universe and why it's here. And when you synergize yourself with the higher purpose of this universe, the higher purpose of this world, the higher modes of how it's all functioning, then you synergize yourself and you place yourself in a flow where you'll actually be able to elevate yourself. So basically the point is that, and that's why I'm coming back to the same point, that you all are young, I can say that now because I'm 43. You're at a point in your life where you can make decisions. It's not all decided for you. But oftentimes we don't make decisions. We think we're making the decision, but what's actually happening is that we're just being guided by traditions, cultures, and so-called truths that may not actually be founded in reality. And so instead of just trying to fit into this world, I'm not saying you need to eject yourself from the world, put on saffron robes, become a monk, and then, start levitating. You can if you want to. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. So don't just try to fit into the world. Try to understand what am I meant to, what is my contribution and purpose in this world? That is a better question to ask. And those who are brave enough to ask that question, they end up living the most meaningful lives. Because to be honest, most people live their life and then they look back and they have regrets. Because they realize I synergized myself with the world. I achieved all of my goals. And then I realized they weren't my goals. They were somebody else's goals. That's the worst type of success. So that's what I was basically explaining to them. All right. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time and your energy.